Glad to have you join us again. You're watching Daybreak here on the Raj News, and some breaking news. The judge, Anthony Kelly, has quashed the government's decision to cancel Novak Djokovic's visa and ordered Djokovic be released within 30 minutes of the decision. The respondent in this case, the Ministry of Home Affairs, must pay Djokovic's costs as agreed or assessed. The order added, all his belongings, including his passport, must be returned to him as soon as reasonably practicable. The decision was officially made moments ago.
So you have the latest, and as that story develops, we'll bring you more news on it. But right now, let's move on to other issues. It's time for the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And we kickstart with our sister publication, This Day newspaper.
Well, on the front page of This Day has it, Sadiku, I was hounded by anti-reform elements for paying 5.8 billion naira to government. You can find details in a copy of This Day. Other stories on the front page there. Oshibajo salutes armed forces' role in sustaining national unity. Zamfara killings. Sadiku urges federal government to ramp up security as Farouk, that's the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, decries situation. Zulum always offer logistic support without prompting, says the GOC. And stock market gains 1.33 trillion naira in first trading week. Finally, ECOWAS imposes further sanctions on Mali junta.
Moving on now to other papers, we've got the Nation newspaper. NLC, that's the Nigeria Labour Congress, mobilizes for protests against hike in petrol price. The action is planned for January the 27th. The TUC is taking a decision on electricity tariffs on January the 20th. Moving on now to other stories. Experts, CBN policies can't rescue the Naira. Find that on page 10. An uneasy calm in APC governor's camp over convention. Fleeing Ondo killer herders in Edo, that's according to Keredolu. And ECOWAS, the regional West African Regional Alliance, hits Mali with border and other sanctions.
And the Punch is leading with enforced compulsory vaccination for local government state workers. That's coming from the federal government to the 36 state governors. NPHCD urges states to set up mass vaccination sites in markets. Others, vaccination grounds at 4.2%. 38 deaths recorded first week in January. It's a busy front page here. On the Punch, you can pick a copy to find details.
A quick look at the Nigerian Tribune. APC may adopt consensus ahead of February convention. That's on page 23. The process to authenticate the next Olubadan continues tomorrow. Page 25, pick the Tribune to find out more on that. 2 years after deadline, more than 50% of Nigerian private school teachers still unqualified. There's more. 5 years after Abuja airport closure, the federal government fails to construct the second runway.
Let's take a look at the international papers this morning. The Guardian hears from campaigners who insist the Housing Secretary Michael Govt's £4 billion plan to upgrade fireproof cladding on high-rise building doesn't go far enough.
And other international papers now. The Independent, harder than ever to stop terror attacks in Britain. That's an exclusive report in there.
The front page of the Daily Telegraph leads with the Chancellor in favor of reducing the self-isolation period for COVID-19 from 7 to 5 days in a bid to ease staffing shortages across the country.
The Daily Express now. Prime Minister urged act now on cost of living squeeze in the UK.
And the Times will avoid COVID crisis, say upbeat NHS chiefs.
This is the Financial Times. NATO stands ready for conflict in Europe. Alliance chief warns Russia. And Hong Kong flight ban leaves executives stranded and threatens city's hub status.
For the press preview, let's bring in Emmanuel Bailo. Good morning, Emmanuel. Great to see you. Start of a fresh week. Leading with our sister publication this day, the newspaper of records. It's leading with what Sadiku is saying. Perhaps you have more details on this story. He says he was hounded by anti-reform element for paying 5.8 billion naira to government. What's this about?
Good morning. Yeah, start of a new week. I think the only interesting, well, what makes it a very interesting story is to see it's an insight into how ordinary people from public life, private engagement, who try to go into government and make some changes, and then they come against all sort of hiccups and. So a whole lot of trouble. So Sadiku is there talking about her experiences and what she brought to that organization, her zeal. She was from the private sector, having been in the banking sector and all of that. Try to introduce measures to run it like any well-run business or so. But you see, those of us who have gone into government will understand what she's talking about. That in most cases, government don't really run that way, and that's part of the problem. Government agencies are supposed to run private concerns, with goals and objectives and also profits. Almost profit orientation among the staffing and all of that. So that's what Sadiku was brought into the organization. But of course, she ended up in the interview, very interesting interview. You hear her talking about all that she, especially the petitions that she suffered from. She was investigated by over close to 5 or so various anti-corruption agency across the country. So she's telling her story after a very long while, and I think that's what makes it interesting. It's also a peep into how individuals go into government organizations and the changes they try to make, and they practically, sometimes from what she's saying now, get punished for doing that. Even the headline says that she believes she was hounded because she paid this amount of money to government. You would think that someone like that should get all the accolades and get some promotions for her effort. But in this heartbreaking interview, she was just talking about how frivolous, she was accused of things like fixing her car, going on a trip, and she saw this as a serious distraction. And it's commonplace, and at the heart of it is what people keep talking about, that sometimes the anti-graft agency too should be careful how they hound supposedly effective people out of the place. So this both a call for that, and also a peep into how individuals go into government organization and suffer all sort of ridicule. With this into her life back, because she says she's been investigated thoroughly and nothing was found on her. So this is her own way of making launching back into the public discourse and saying that, look, I've learned a lot. In one of the segments, she said she had no regrets, that she believed it was a spiritual mission for her. She's seen a whole lot, and that has emboldened her and repositioned her to give her best to government. That should be the spirit, really, not to be discouraged, because these are some of the crises and the difficulties associated with working in the public sector.
Well said, Emmanuel. Let's peep at the Nation newspaper. The Nigerian Labour Congress is mobilizing for protests against hiking petrol price, and the action is planned for January the 27th. Should we anticipate Occupy Nigeria 2.0? Are the citizens ready for it? Do they want it?
Well, I think the citizens will look forward to anything that will make their lives better. The government keeps saying that, look, this is for you. NLC saying this is also for you. So the citizens are torn between these two tendencies, and the arguments are there. They've always been there. That, look, if we take away these fuel subsidies, we'll make your life better. But of course, NLC and so many Nigerians thinking that, look, a hike is the last thing you want. Now already we begin to see the reverberation of some of the, because of the anticipation for some of these hikes. you're beginning to see those long queues again, and when the filling station's not selling. So Nigerians are used to those kind of troubles. But a lot of people think that, look, with all that we have gone through in the last 2 years, there was COVID, there was those lockdowns, and all the crises that we've been through. Well, why should anybody be talking about the hike? But this government going ahead with its plan, with the president speaking on almost 2 networks last week, in interviews with the finance minister, saying that, look, those subsidies are not helping anyone, and that we can plow this money into making lives better. We can help Nigerians with some stipends to survive the issue of transportation. But NLC looking at it differently and saying, look, we'll mobilize Nigerians. The momentum is on the side of the NLC. Nobody understands what government is talking about, which is an irony, because 10 years ago, this same government that came up with Occupy Nigeria, when Occupy Nigeria was the 1.0, the first leg of it, was not actually in support of the removal of those subsidies, but now it's faced with that crisis itself, that it must remove these subsidies. So it's an interesting day. It's just a few days ahead here. What we should be looking at is how effective will this be? Would this help government to rethink its decision, or is this something that is set already in the budget? There is no provision made, and the finance minister saying that sometime down the line, around maybe in the middle of the year, those subsidies will be removed, and the Nigerians will come face to face with the stark reality of buying fuel at those prices, that the hikes that the NLC is trying to fight down. So, yes, the momentum is on the side of the NLC. A lot of Nigerians are not really prepared for any kind of hike. Times are hard, and the last thing any Nigerian is thinking about is why you want to. Nobody can understand even the economic theory behind it, but government again and again trying to get Nigerians to buy into the policy removal of the subsidies, saying that no one is gaining from that, and that government will use those subsidies to do better things. Many Nigerians thinking differently, and now NLC trying to give them voice in protests. It's going to be an interesting showdown.
And we'll keep our fingers crossed and our eyes on that story, Emmanuel. Let's look at the front page of the Punch this morning. It decided to go with COVID-19. It says that the federal government has told the state governors to enforce compulsory vaccination for local government and state workers. Is this something that is plausible, Emmanuel, in your own view?
Well, it's possible, but of course, sometimes even the issues of personal example is a crisis itself, with some of the officials seeing really, not really abiding by any of these COVID restrictions or curbs. Here, we don't see the same kind of seriousness that we see. We've been doing stories around the world, and we see the seriousness, the coverage that it gets, and now the federal government here is asking states and local government in some of these states and some of the local governments. Honestly, the last thing on their mind is probably COVID, which is terrible, because this should be a serious push. So this is the federal government trying to make those push. But of course, what about the issue of vaccination? Are there enough vaccines? What access are people getting to for these vaccines? We know how ordinary things turn out to be, let alone this kind of push. So it's a good push. It's good soundbite. It sounds like a good push in the right direction, but the implementation might just be the issue. But by and large, the federal government is using this to showcase seriousness, saying that they are tough on restrictions and on the COVID, like you're finding in the rest of the world. But what the rest of the world has been doing so far is increasing those jabs, increasing those vaccine, making them available to people, and also enforcing the restrictions and things like this. So we must, if we're going to be part of the global community, we must adopt some of those seriousness and the kind of effectiveness that we're seeing around the war against this disease. We've not seen much of that, but with this push, that's already federal government saying that you can't get into your offices. We should be monitoring that to see how effective that has become, and now pushing it back to the state and to the local government and saying they want to enforce it. If they can pull this off, then they will have been demonstrating the kind of international seriousness, or the seriousness we see on the international level, and that would be really happy.
Okay, thanks for your brilliant take this morning, Emmanuel Bello.